Thomas and the CDFM study group. Welcome. All right, the purpose of the session today is for me to complete the part 2 review of CDFM Module 1 and also cover the fiscal law portion that overlaps. So remember, even though you have Module 1, 2, and 3, the information in all three of them overlaps. So you can't just focus on one module and exclude the others. When you study, you look through all three modules, then you zoom in into that particular module that you're going to be testing on for that particular session. However, you got to remember the information that applies to it from the other sections. And so that's what I try to do. All right, so we're going to start with fiscal law. Remember earlier in Module 1 when we talked about the separation of powers from the Constitution, establish the three branches of government, legislative or Congress, executive or the president, judicial or the courts. And then it gives the power of the purse to Congress. That means Congress control the money. And so how does Congress control the money? Through the use of these appropriations. And the fiscal law applies to the use of the appropriation. And so all of that kind of overlaps together. So the basic idea behind fiscal law is that Congress must state what you can or cannot do with these funding, or you can't use it. And so we have to make sure in the use of these funds that we are applying them in the manner in which Congress intended. Because if not, then you have the Comptroller General that does the oversight for the budget. And the Comptroller General is the individual in charge of the Government Accountability Office, commonly known as GAO. GAO is the external auditing agency that works directly for Congress to make sure that we're following the fiscal law or the use of these appropriations. All right, so under Article 1, we know it governs which branch of government? The legislative branch or Congress. Article 1, Section 7, we learned that it empowers Congress to raise revenue. And also in Section 7 that we learned from Module 1 is that it gives the president that 10-day timeline when Congress sends a bill to the president or something for the president to sign. The president has 10 days if Congress is in session. And if he doesn't sign it within 10 days, that bill will automatically become law. All of that is covered under Article 1, Section 7. Article 1, Section 8 gives Congress the ability to collect taxes. And then the one that I told every financial manager should know, if you don't remember none of them, you need to know Article 1, Section 9, Clause 7, that says no money can be drawn out of the Treasury unless we have an appropriation law in place. And so the reason the government will shut down is if we don't have that appropriation, or if we do not have a continuing resolution, the CR, because the CR is a temporary appropriation law, temporary appropriation act. And that stopgap to give us enough time to, like a bridge contract, that's what the CR is. It kind of bridges, give us an opportunity, keep the government open, and be able to give us more time to make a decision. As we talked about the GAO a few minutes ago, understanding that the GAO, because they're the external auditing agency that works directly for Congress, repetition, right, is they issue guidances, they issue authoritative resources they provide for us. So the most popular ones that we deal with in the CDFM is the GAO Red Book, Yellow Book, and Green Book. Think of a stoplight, red, yellow, green. Red deals with appropriation law, yellow deals with auditing, and green deals with internal control. That's your stoplight, that's the GAO guidances that we study in the CDFM. All right, so It's important also when you're studying to learn some of these laws, because the Budget and Accounting Act of 1921 is essential because three important things came out of it. It required the president to submit the budget to Congress no later than the first Monday in February. We say that quite frequently. Well, it's because of the 1921 Budget and Accounting Act that came out of it. The second thing, it created the Office of Management and Budget, OMB. Who does OMB work for? They're the resource manager or the chief financial officer for the executive branch, for the president. That's the second thing that came out of the 1921 Budget and Accounting Act. The third thing that came out of that act is the establishment of the GAO. So required the president to submit the budget to Congress no later than the first Monday in February, created OMB and created GAO, 1921 Budget and Accounting Act. Office of Management and Budget is in charge of the PresBud, pulling the president's budget together. And so guidance that we receive from OMB is often published in an OMB circular. Which OMB circular deals with budget appropriation, budget formulation, budget execution, everything budget is covered in OMB circular A11. That's correct. And so the use of the funds under the Constitution, their guidelines and what we can use. Some of us have fiduciary responsibility because we're a fiduciary certifier. Some have pecuniary responsibility. Fiduciary has an F in front of it, fund. They certify the funds, meaning you're using the right appropriation. That's what I'm certifying. Versus a pecuniary certifier is certifying the payment. Starts with a P, certifying the actual disbursement payment amount to make sure that, okay, the documents match what we're paying out. So I'm either certifying the right appropriation, the right fund, or I'm certifying the payment, correct payment. If you are certifying the actual payment, disbursement, that pecuniary liability comes with it that says if it's found that something is fraud, waste, abuse, and you certified that document, you may be held liable to pay back some of that money because you have pecuniary liability. So as we mentioned, power of the purse means that Congress can control the purpose, time, and amount of the appropriation that we receive. So every appropriation has a specific purpose that is covered. If you violate it, you're violating 31 U.S. Code 1301. If you violate time, it's 1502. If you violate amount, it's 1341, 1342, 1517. So what you need to know is the differences. So we know that purpose only has one. I'm violating 1301, meaning I need to do a military construction project, build something. It costs $5 billion, but I'm using O&M dollars to do it. Something not right with that. So violating the purpose. Or I can violate the timeline on the use of those appropriation under 31 U.S. Code 1342. All right. So let's get not 1342. Let me recap. So let's stick with purpose. On the purpose, some have specific purpose, general purpose. You got to apply the necessary expense doctrine or necessary expense rule that says you got to make sure the appropriation does not bear a logical relationship to another source that provides the same resources. I got to make sure that it's not already prohibited by law and that it's not provided for elsewhere. So a logical relationship to what I'm trying to purchase. I'm using the right appropriation. I need to make sure it's not prohibited by law or it's not provided by elsewhere. So that's 31 U.S. Code 1301. If I violate purpose for those conditions. If I don't want to violate time, or if I violate time, the Anti-Deficiency Act specific to that is 31 U.S. Code 1502. Under time, you have to look at the bona fide needs rule. Current year needs, current dollars. You always have exceptions. So what are those exceptions? If I have a current need and I want to use current dollars, you have to look at the type of service. Is it a severable versus an unseverable service? Then you have to look at the timeline. If it's a severable service, 12 months or less, you obligate the full amount of the contract when the contract is awarded. If the contract is awarded in September for 12 months, I'm obligating the whole 12 months in that severable. Severable contracts like your cleaning, your maintenance, housekeeping, those things are severable, meaning if I end the job today, the previous sessions, I would have received a benefit. Versus a non-severable is I have to complete the entire job to get the benefit. So I have to pay everything, the entire amount. And so under severable, sometimes you have those maintenance contract or those housekeeping contracts that's more than 12 months, 13 months, 14, 15, whatever the contract states, but you can only obligate up to 12 months with current funds, and then the rest is subject to availability of funds. An example of switching back to non-severable, an example of non-severable is training, because you usually have a training schedule, you got certain days, you got to test, you got a lot of requirements associated with a particular class. And so this chair up is getting on my nerve. Sorry. So you have to complete the training and you got to pay for the whole training session. So training is an example of a non-severable service. So some permissible action at the start of a fiscal year. Let's put it that way. So let's say it's September and Congress has already appropriated the DoD funds for the next fiscal year. If you're starting a contract in October and the contract is going through the KO, you can cite the appropriation or the allotment that you've received up to that point. Just because, let me put this disclaimer out, just because Congress has appropriated funds for the Department of Defense, it does not give us at the lower level the ability to obligate funds. We cannot obligate until we get our allotment. So you got to make sure all those things are in line. Because some people think just because Congress appropriated the DoD funds, then automatically everybody DoD can just start spending however they want to. Doesn't work that way. So it's either subject to availability of funds, meaning Congress has not appropriated and we've not received our money, or we've already received our allotment and for the next fiscal year, and we can cite that appropriation. All right, so appropriation life cycle. You have MILPERS and O&M are 1 year expense type. MILPERS, you're paying your military, O&M, your miscellaneous, paying your civilians, your day-to-day training, TDYs, O&M. RDT&E is a 2-year appropriation. Procurement is 3. Military construction and shipbuilding conversion Navy, which is a procurement type, but it's a 5-year because you can't build a ship, I guess, in 3 years. It's a 5-year appropriation or investment types. What you need to know is, can I use O&M funds to do a military construction project? Yes. If it's a minor construction project that is less than or equal to $2 million, I can use O&M funding to do it. Additionally, I can use O&M funds to procure. I don't have to get procurement dollars, but the condition there is $250,000 or less, then I can use O&M funding. So the timeline and the life cycle of those appropriations is essential, because then you get to the appropriation life cycle where you can be asked questions on an exam. Excuse me there. I alternate with these glasses. All right, so phase one of every appropriation based on the life cycle I just gave you, the timeline, is current, meaning I can have new contracts, new obligations. Then the appropriation enters phase two, which is the expired state. Every appropriation stays expired for how many years? 5 years. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if I have a military construction, the phase one is 5, then the expired is another 5, so you got 10 years, and then the 11th year, it is closed or canceled. What can you do when a fund is expired? You can make upward or downward adjustments. You can only make adjustments. That means you have to already have had a contract in place before that funds expired, or you cannot start a new contract. Phase 3 says it's closed or canceled. When an account is closed or canceled, such as this year, we're closing out FY19, those funds, 1 October of this 2024, these funds will then be released and swoop back up to the miscellaneous receipts account in the Treasury to pay our interest on debt or whatever those miscellaneous bills that come in to the Treasury. However, under the cancellation of an appropriation, you have that 1% rule that says you can use up to 1% of current appropriation to pay a bill. So let's say a bill comes in and you look and you see, oh, that appropriation that was supposed to pay it is already closed. And okay, but it's only like $10 and I have $10 if of that appropriation, I can go ahead and pay the bill. Or you refer them to DFAS to work it through that channel. And then you have, so that's dealing with time. So purpose is 31 U.S. Code 1301, time 1502, amount 1341, 1342, 1517. So you need to know the difference. We know that 1342 deals with voluntary services. If it's a paid position in the government, no, you cannot accept voluntary services. The exception is if that position is flexible for the manager to reduce the amount to 0, yes, you can. If that particular position is a statutory position, candy stripers, museum workers, those positions are already annotated by law that they accept volunteers. Yes, you can accept volunteers. But if someone, hey, I'm not working right now, I want to keep up on my craft, can I come in and sit side by side? I'll help you do some work in the meantime to keep my craft up. No, you cannot accept volunteer services. All right. So let's go to 1341 and let's compare 1341 to 1517. 1341 addresses appropriation. So remember the fund flow. Congress appropriate, OMB apportions, DOD issues allotment, then we commit, obligate, and outlay. And so if 1341 is a violation of the use of the appropriation, that tells me it's at an OMB to Congress level, between there, because OMB receives the appropriation. So if you use 1341, you're saying as it trickles back up, OMB violated 1341. 1517 talks about violation of apportionment. 1517. Who receives apportionment? The agencies. OMB issues apportionment to DOD, Department of State, Department of Education, and all of them get apportionment. So who can be, once it trickles up, because it doesn't mean that we cannot violate it at our lower level. It just means as we go up to our higher, and if it cannot be fixed, it goes to the next higher, it cannot be fixed. When it gets to DOD and DOD cannot fix it, then now it becomes a 31 U.S. Code 1517 violation of apportionment. So hopefully that made it a little bit easier. And I mentioned the fund flow and outlay. Outlay is when Funds are removed from the treasury to liquidate an obligation. That's the formal definition. I want to pay off an obligation that the government has that is an outlay. Can I accept gifts from contractors? Yes, but I'm limited to a $20 value, and for that year annually, the total value received from that same contractor cannot exceed $50. What else we learn about money? Gifts to superiors or supervisors. Employees are limited to a $10 value. $10 is the limit. Either you give $10 cash or $10 donation if your supervisor's leaving and you're giving a gift. It doesn't really specify if the supervisor is contributing or buying a gift for the subordinates. It's more of from the employees to the supervisor. All right, so what happens if you commit an ADA violation and it's identified as a full-fledged ADA violation of whether it's purpose, time, or amount? You have 2 weeks from the date of discovery to report it to higher. And then you have 4 months to complete that initial discovery. You got to do your findings. You got to find out why it happened and so forth. So we touched on continuing resolution. Again, if we don't have a CR, then the government will shut down. Because we don't have an appropriation law, because we don't have a CR, under Article 1, Section 9, Clause 7, the Treasury cannot open. That's where that's where you get the money from. So if the bank is shut down, you're not going to get any new fiscal year appropriation. So CR, we are restricted to the same rate of operation as we did in the previous fiscal year. So whatever TDYs you were going on, travel, whatever contracts you had, you can't come up with a new contract, which we have individuals all the time. Like, no, we're still under CR. You can't come with a new idea contract to initiate under the rules of the CR. We will violate that rule. So same rate of operation. Now, remember, if you operate under the rules of the CR, then Congress appropriates, let's say, a lower amount for that particular program or that particular mission. You did not commit an ADA violation as long as you were operating under the rules of the CR at that time. As you may or may not see a question similar to that. So we don't typically get augmented with our budget or go back to Congress and ask for more money. Is usually now the rule is you pay as you go, meaning you can cut something else. So you got to prioritize your requirements and you got to cut something else and have a zero gain or zero impact. To do this, you got to cut this out to use the money or something like that. Legal advance decision. When in doubt, go to your ethics lawyers, go to your higher, get advanced decisions, meaning authority, approval, and making sure they understand what exactly you're trying to do if you're not comfortable. Because once you put your name on that transaction, it is there. I have things coming back. It's like, oh, Helen Thomas, yeah, you did this back in 2015. It's like, I don't remember back then. And then you have to like, oh, okay, yep, that was me. That's the transaction and so forth. All right, let's see what else we got. So what is the statute of limitation? That's like how long before somebody can come after you. If it's an error that you made in a transaction, it's 3 years. Now, it's not 3 years from when you did that transaction. It's 3 years from when the Comptroller General received that notification, right? So it could be 10 years later, and if put on that Comptroller General's desk, the individual in charge of GAO, then it's 3 years from when they get it. And then you have, if it's for fraud, there's no time limit. They can always come back for you. What is the 41 U.S. Code 6301? 41 U.S. Code 6301. 41 U.S. Code 6301. Oh, I forgot I got a session. Yes. 41 U.S. Code 6301 is the Feed and Forage Act. The only time I've seen it is on that one chart at the very back of Module 3. The Feed and Forage Act is a law that authorizes the Department of Defense only to incur obligations in excess of available appropriation. So usually if let's say we have a hurricane in Haiti or earthquake in Haiti or hurricane in California, Department of Defense, go, do. We'll worry about the money later. Under the Feed and Forage Act, we can spend money for conditions. There's always conditions. Clothing. If we go to an area where it's excessively cold and we don't have the right gear, we might have to buy clothing for our troops. Clothing, foods, medical supplies, hospital supplies. So all of those, fuel, we got to drive our vehicles. So all of those things that are necessary for us to get where we're going right away, and we don't have to wait on Congress to make decisions. If they want us to go, then we got to go. So the Department of Defense, DOD, is the only agency that can utilize 41 U.S. Code 6301. All right. Two things happen when Congress appropriates the funds. What happens? If they come and they say, all right, we got an appropriation, then you should know, okay, now two things are getting ready to happen. The legal part that's tied to Article 1, Section 9, Clause 7, is the Treasury issuing the Treasury warrant. Once the Treasury gets notice that the appropriation law is in place, the Treasury will issue a notification when the accounts are set up. Hey, we got the appropriation law, your bank account set up, your account set up, you can start spending. That's the Treasury warrant. That's the legal step. Then you have the administrative steps, which is OMB apportionment process. The apportionment process begins with the agencies filling out an SF-132 document. And that 132 document is them requesting their money from OMB within 10 days of the appropriation law. Then OMB has 30 days to give them their apportionment. Then the agencies, such as Department of Defense, issues allotment. I give you your allotment. Then we commit administrative reservation of funds, obligate legal reservation of funds. Now I've legally bind the government to make this payment, and outlay. Outlay is when the funds come out to Treasury to liquidate that obligation. All right, that's all I have for today to finalize that review of CDFM Module 1 and also covering CDFM Module 3 Competency 1, Fiscal Law, to incorporate as much fiscal law as we can. Again, this is Helen Thomas and the CDFM Study Group. I'll see you guys again next time.